Senators, I've listened to the debate on the floor, and it's been an outstanding debate because this is a very important issue. This really determines how we feel and how we care about our fellow man, about our fellow woman. You know, if I believed in the slightest that raising this minimum wage would help the poor, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But we know that this is a false hope. You see, the measure of wealth is not in the amount of money that you make. It's in the amount of purchasing power you can buy. I could make $1 million, but if a hamburger cost me $1 million, I'm no further ahead than if I made $1 and the hamburger cost $1. Mr. Pro Tem, you can stand right here with me if you like. So when we're looking at this, we need to be thinking in terms of whether we're lifting people in our community, whether we're giving them a path to prosperity, whether we're truly achieving the goal that we set forward. And I've heard a lot of great statistics on the floor on both sides. Let me just walk you through the way I look at it. You see, I had employees working for me. And I had some employees that started off with minimum wage. And they were never meant to be set with a glass ceiling of minimum wage. My goal was always to break them through that glass ceiling, that they would never ever have to retire on minimum wage. But we would give them the path to prosperity. So you may be hired as a receptionist working for me, and you may start at minimum wage, because it took me 5 minutes to train you to be a receptionist. You answer the phone and you write down the message accurately. But then I would encourage you to go back and perhaps to learn to type. So now you could be a secretary and you could make more than minimum wage, in fact, double minimum wage. And if you did that job well, I'd encourage you to go back and get a community college degree, and I'd make you a foreman or a manager. And then you make double or triple what the typist could make. And then I'd encourage you to go back and gain additional skills so that you could be a general manager and make 6 or 8 or 10 times as much as that entry-level employee. You see, my goal was to lift people. It wasn't to hold them down. It wasn't to feed them a placebo and pretend that I was helping them. You see, if my buying power doesn't increase, then it's not really a wage hike. I've not gained anything more. I'm simply on a treadmill running fast, thinking I'm getting further ahead, but never moving anywhere. That's unfair to entry-level workers. That's unfair to our fellow Californians. You see, I believe that we should be holding the UC system accountable. We just had an audit report last week that said that they were giving priority treatment to students with lesser grades from out of state because they were so greedy they wanted that out-of-state pay. So that our kids in our community wouldn't have access to the schools that our taxes paid for. It's outrageous to me that we're not focused more on vocational education in the UC and the CSU system, giving people a path to prosperity. To turn around and to give them false hope and feed them a placebo and say, oh, we're doing wonderful things, and oh, by the way, next week when you can't buy a hamburger or any more hamburgers than the hamburgers that you're purchasing today, because we know that in most products and services, 80% of the cost of that product or service, in most, as a general rule, is labor. And by artificially increasing the cost of that labor, they're no further ahead. They're simply on a treadmill, running faster and faster, never getting ahead. And yet, we're giving them that false hope. We're saying to them that we're lifting you and we're giving you a path. Yet the people, the greedy people in the UC system that are withholding slots from our children, not giving them access to the education that will lead to a world-class career and job, is absolutely outrageous to me. Look, I want to work across party lines. I want to lift people. I don't think that anybody should have to live in poverty in this day and age in California or anywhere in the United States. But let's go at the real crux of it. Let's help people become the best they can be. Let's not put a false ceiling on them and say, oh, we're going to raise minimum wage again in a few years to $20 an hour because we want you to retire on it. I don't want anybody retiring on it. And I get it that some people have to earn minimum wage because they don't have the skill sets, but I want to change their skill sets because I believe in them. I believe they're worth more than that. And while they have a great pride on that minimum job, that entry-level job, I admire them for the pride in work. But you know what gives them more pride? It's the pride that comes for providing from your family. That's the greatest pride anybody can have, is being able to provide for your family. And when you give them false hope, and when you steal their future by simply raising their wage but not giving them earning potential that leads to buying potential, then you've stolen from them. Now, let's go one step further. So who else gets hurt by this? The middle class. You see, that person that started, who went back to school, learned to type, got their associate's degree, got their bachelor's degree, is now the general manager, who's worked their way up over the last 15 years, working extra hours on Saturdays and Sundays to ensure that they got promoted. Their buying power's decreased because the cost of hamburgers, the cost of everything around them, has now been raised through inflation. So we've brought them closer to the bottom. We have not increased the bottom in any way, shape, or form. And who gains? The uber rich. This is a bill for the uber rich. They're the only ones because you know what? No one's going to rise up and hold them accountable. No one's going to rise up and be angry because, after all, we fed them a placebo by giving them a false hope, by keeping them on a treadmill instead of getting them off the treadmill and giving them a path to prosperity. So I also look at it and I think, well, maybe this does help them. Let's say that it does help them. What about our seniors who are on fixed incomes? What about anybody who's on a fixed income? Because this is an inflation driver. And if my goal was to help people retire on minimum wage, I would vote for this in a heartbeat. But my goal is to break that glass ceiling that we're trying to put on poor people and give them a path to prosperity so they don't have to retire on minimum wage. I want to give them the block grants necessary to get the vocational skills that make the work they do worth more. I want to give them the education path, and I'm not going to allow greedy UC regions to bring students from out of state so they can collect extra monies as opposed to putting our kids, our constituents' children, giving them first priority on our tax dollars and giving them a world-class education. Listen, I want to lift those people. I don't want them to be in poverty, just like you do. That's the one theme that no matter who speaks on this floor all agrees with. Nobody came here to keep people poor. We all came here, but we have different views on how to get there. And I respect everybody for the wonderful debate and the fact that their heart's in the right place. But let's do something that's truly meaningful by my standard, and that's to give people a path to prosperity. Don't hold them down. Don't pretend to tell them that we're enriching their lives by not giving them one additional element of education, not one additional skill, not one additional craft. Instead, we're just patting them on the head to make them go away to the next election cycle. Because it'll be 5 years before they figure out there's been a bait and switch. They're making more money. They're just not buying more. They're not making a mortgage payment because they still can't afford a house. They're not eating out every night because they don't have the money to do that. They're literally living from paycheck to paycheck because we didn't enrich them as people. We devalued them by giving them a placebo and sending them on their way. Let's get them off the treadmill. Let's put them to work in a way that leads to a prosperous future. And that means they need skills. Whether those skills come academically or vocationally, it doesn't matter. But let's put them on a trajectory that leads to a better future. Members, I want to work with you. I'm eager to look and talk about block grants to help people get those vocational skills or education skills, and I hope that you work with me in holding the UC regions accountable for forcing our kids to go out of state for school because they don't provide the slots to us. You know, what I thought was most outrageous in that audit was that they were accepting students that were lesser qualified from out of state because they valued the money more than they valued our citizens. And that's just plain wrong. And if we allow that to continue and yet continue to raise minimum wage, we have failed the poor because we've never changed their standard in life. In fact, we've denied them access to what their taxes have paid for, a quality education. Please join me in supporting the poor by giving them a path to prosperity, not a placebo. I urge a no vote.